Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I love working with my colleagues. I love bouncing ideas between each other's, using or complementing each other's knowledge and using those combined talents to solve complex business or technical challenges. Basically, I love working in close-knit teams. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened as often as I would have liked it to over the course of my career. All too often, I see team members working on different things. They're either working on different stories in the same project. Maybe they're even working on completely different projects. Everybody's working on something different so that they're all independent from each other. And I find that an interesting word, independent, especially in a team situation, because in that situation, are we even a team at all? Or are we simply a collection of colleagues working independently at the same island of desks? And that word, independent, it's not free. It has costs associated with it. Inside my team, I now have less insight into what my fellow team members are doing outside of a 15-minute stand-up at the start of the day when everybody's speaking about something different to each other. I don't actually get to hear what they're doing. And because of this disconnect, because some connection is lost between us, even if we're a really close team otherwise, bouncing ideas, helping each other, it now becomes hard. Because when we try to bounce ideas, when we try to help each other, it means that one or other of us has to context switch. We have to interrupt what we're doing. And it gives the teams other issues as well. We now have far more work in progress because each story takes longer when there's only one person working on it. And each team member has their own set of stories. And that gives us a problem with resilience. If everybody has their own area, then what happens when that one lucky team member wins the lottery and quits the next day? Or if they just want to go on holiday for 2 weeks? Or they just call in ill one morning? All of these things interrupt a company's ability to provide value to our customers in a timely fashion. But I'm supposed to be talking about pair programming, and I've not done that yet. So why do I think they're connected? Well, one way that you can help teams not fall into this trap of being independent colleagues at the same island of desks is to pair program. When it's done right, we get to work together. And I mean really work together, to think of better solutions, to have that better collaboration, and to implement things with less lead time. Hi, I'm Stacy Cashmore. As was said in the introduction, I've been a software developer since the mid-1990s. Over that time, I have worked in various different industries, companies, and roles, and I have seen many different ways that teams can work together. Some of them are better than others. At my previous job, I was lucky enough to work there for 14 years, and I saw the whole gamut of different ways of working together. When I started back in 2006, everybody was an individual. In fact, my first project on day one was to implement a complex algorithm in the middle of the car insurance site by myself. We had some bigger projects, but it was still individuals working on different facets of that project. They weren't working together. And we saw all of the issues that I've just brought up in the introduction. So in 2012, we decided to adopt Scrum as our framework for developing. We had 3 different teams, and we noticed we were still individuals. We were teams, but we were still individuals. We even got questions out of the team. How can we all work on this together? We're in the same code base. We're treading on each other's toes. We are in merge hell, and it's just slowing us down. And so over the coming years, the teams tried different experiments and different ways of working with each other to try and find something that worked. In my last 4 years, I worked with an amazing team that was constantly experimenting and trying to find new things. And pair programming became a big part of this. It was an amazing learning experience for us, and despite the effort that it took to get working, it paid dividends back not only to us as developers, but also the company itself. But if I'm saying it's so fantastic, why doesn't everybody just do it? Why do we need to talk about it? Why do I get laughed at when I talk about it sometimes? Well, there's a few things that teams regularly run into when they try and do this, from my experience. And if they happen, they make pairing, let's say, less than great. And today I want to concentrate on the most common one, and that is sleepy pairing. Now, this can happen with the person at the keyboard, can happen with the person behind you. And I'm sure if you've ever tried pairing, you'll recognize this scenario. You have two or more people, one of them sitting at the keyboard. They're feverishly working away. They're working through the problem. They're coming up with a solution. They're fighting that solution when it doesn't quite do what they want, turning all of that into code and putting it into the computer. The person that's pairing with them, they're doing one of two things. Either they're standing just behind the shoulder, staring at the screen, making the person at the keyboard feel really uncomfortable, but not really joining in. Or maybe they're a meter or so away. They are totally distracted. They're playing with their phone. And occasionally they look up at the screen and go, yeah, okay. Before returning to Facebook, Twitter, shooting zombies in an MMO game. And I liken this to a long car journey. You've got the driver. They're concentrating the whole day. They're looking for traffic problems. They're trying to figure out which way they need to go, watching the road, trying to keep everybody safe. Passengers, meanwhile, they're struggling to stay awake. Maybe you've got that backseat driver watching everything the driver does, making them feel really uncomfortable. Maybe you've got someone just staring out of the window, watching the world go by. Maybe if you've got somebody who doesn't get motion sickness, they're just binge watching Netflix until the phone battery dies on them. And at the end of the journey, you have a driver that they're exhausted. They get out of the car, they stretch. They look for something to recuperate. They've got a headache. They've concentrated the whole day. They just want to sleep. And the passengers, they're also tired, but they're tired through boredom more than anything else. And so it is with our developers in this sleepy pairing. The person doing the heavy lifting at the keyboard, they have the same workload as they had the day before by themselves. Only now they've got that workload with somebody watching every key press they do without really offering that much assistance. And the person watching over the shoulder, they're tired. Watching somebody code is really tiring if you have to do it for more than about 10 minutes or so. But they've also got this nagging feeling that maybe they've not been using their time as they want to. And the person with the phone, they have an awesome score in that zombie game. They've also got this gnawing feeling that maybe this isn't how they should be spending their time. Either one of them feels useless because of this. So the next day they return to their own machines. They put on their noise-canceling headphones to drown out the open plan office, and they go back to working independently. They both feel previous day is a waste, as is pairing in general. So that's our sleepy navigator. We can also have a sleepy driver. And I've seen this often when a team tries to implement the driver navigator roles to try and get the interaction that you lose with the sleepy navigator scenario. We have the driver. They have the keyboard. They're putting the code in. The navigator, they're solving the problem, telling the driver what to do. Now, this, as I say, this really helps the second person get involved. Neither the yuppie nor the zombie killer can do either of those things, because if they do, the driver can't drive. We have involvement from both parties. The navigator coming up with ideas, coming up with solutions, the driver putting them into the computer. Sounds almost idyllic. People around the typist are actively involved here. You don't have the yuppies. You don't have the zombies. Only I don't know. In Sleepy Drivers, you do have the zombie. And it's just not the one in the MMO game. It's the typist. And I'm using that word deliberately, typist. Sitting at the keyboard, banging in the words that the navigator tells them to type. But once they're doing this, they're not thinking about what they're putting into the computer. Have you ever seen stories about drivers who end up at the wrong destination? They have a satellite navigation system. They do everything that that system tells them to without thinking about it. They end up lost in the middle of a field. In the worst cases, I've read about trapped between two houses in a narrow lane, in water, in the wrong country even. The navigation system says, you have arrived. You think, well, maybe, but where? How did I get here? Why are my feet wet? And so at the end of the day, with our pair programmers, we've still got an exhausted person. And it's the person who's been doing all of the thinking. It's the one coming up with the solution. Only why they've been doing this, they've been held up by the person at the keyboard. Because that person at the keyboard, they're not using the shortcuts that you know how to use. It's frustrating. And you can't carry on thinking of your solution because you're going to lose the guy at the keyboard if you do. And the typist bashing the keys with no thought, they're exhausted. Yesterday, they were exhausted doing all the heavy lifting. Today, they're exhausted just thinking, I didn't become a developer just to type somebody else's words. I'm not including Stack Overflow here. So the next day, our pair, they return to their own machines. They put on their noise-canceling headphones to drown out the open plan office, and they go back to working independently. They feel the previous day was a waste, and you know what? Except for really complex problems, so is pairing. Now, with these two issues, the Sleepy Navigator and the Sleepy Driver, teams can find it very hard to continue once they encounter them. My experience has been with teams stopping multiple times when this happens because couldn't quite figure out how to break through it. And it's also some of the biggest reasons I've heard from companies and developers to say they don't even want to try pair programming because it's just too costly and too wasteful, to give up before you even start. But there's things we can do to help our sleepy people. And the first one, I want to tackle the Sleepy Navigator. When we hit this repeatedly, we started to look at what was causing the problem. And we figured out pretty much it's distractions. Certainly for the person with the phone, because our phones give us huge amount of distractions. We are addicted to our phones. I know that I am. They provide loads for us. Email, Slack, Teams, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter. And if we're not busy with our fingers on a keyboard, it can get really tempting to pick one up and to try and do something with it. But when I give this talk in person, generally about now, 1 or 2 people look up in the audience looking really sheepish and guilty. And this is a distraction that takes a lot of mental energy to remove. When I was being the navigator, I saw that I had issues with it. And I knew, okay, if I want to be more involved, I've got to change this. So I took my phone and I put it at arm's length away. But I noticed all I did is just stretch, pick it up and check it, and then stretch and put it back slightly out of reach again. Great for your daily workout. Yeah, not so great when you're trying to concentrate. I realized I had to get rid of it completely. Just remove all of the distractions. So I picked it up and I tossed it onto my desk, which was behind the desk I was working at. Carefully, glass smartphone, it's not a Nokia 3310. And it hurt. It felt awful because we're addicted to our phones. But after a while, the pain kind of goes away and I could concentrate better than I could before. Most of what we do on our phone, Twitter, WhatsApp, etc., it's not important. It's a fear of missing out. It's habit. After a while, you don't miss it. Emails, they're a little bit harder because emails can make you feel important. Are you missing that urgent question? Are you missing a major incident that you need to attend to? Is production on fire and the website down? What happens if I don't answer these things, if I don't see them? And as a navigator, you don't get to see them because I'm not at my computer. And the thing that we had to realize is if somebody has that urgent question, if there's an incident, if the website's on fire, production's down, they're going to find you. If you're needed, they're going to find you. They're not going to fire off an email and let things simmer. And if they don't do that, it's really not that important. So working to remove these distractions, we could get more into the flow and get that involvement from the navigator into the process. But we still needed to take care of the sleepy driver at this point. And we solved this by re-examining the roles that we were giving to people. So the navigator, we expanded that to be somebody who thinks of a solution and explains that solution to the driver until the driver understood what the solution was going to be. The driver was somebody who listened to the navigator, understood what the navigator was trying to explain, and turned that understanding into code. To return to our driver metaphor one last time, if you're driving, your job isn't to follow what the satellite navigation system says without thinking and just do it. Your job is to listen to those instructions, to understand what it's saying, to check they're right, to make sure it's safe to use them, and to get you to the right place safely. And so it is with the driver in a pair. It's not just somebody who follows the instructions. It's somebody who listens to the navigator, tries to understand what they're trying to achieve, and if they don't, you don't write code. The navigator needs to take the extra time in these situations to make sure that they change the way they're talking about something. Take a trip to a whiteboard and start to sketch it out, to figure out what they have to do, explain it differently. What you don't do is simply grab the keyboard and say, let me just quickly do this, and then we'll carry on. Because if you do that, you're back into sleepy pairing. The driver's now a sleepy navigator, they're not involved. And when the driver does get what's going on, they get a flash of inspiration. They're really excited. They know how they're going to solve this problem. You don't just start typing and putting your undoubtedly awesome solution into the computer. Rather, you excitedly give the keyboard to the navigator. You tell them about your awesome idea and you switch roles. Because again, the second you just start typing, your navigator is cut out of your pair and you lose them completely. You're back into sleepy pairing. And if each person fulfills the roles in this way, without distraction, being an active member of the pair, then we move from sleepy pairing into strong pairing. And this is where the benefits really start to happen. The first of these is collaboration. We are now working together. We are getting things finished together, from beginning to in progress to done as a team. We are bouncing ideas between each other to do this. We are helping each other improve. We're using our joint talents to solve those complex problems. And we're having to communicate so much more when we do this. And by communicating more, we share our knowledge more. And that means that when that one lucky person wins the lottery and quits, or goes on vacation, or is ill for a day, it doesn't give us a huge problem anymore. Because we're pairing, there's always somebody with the knowledge left available. And that person can carry on then and pair with somebody new so that you spread the knowledge yet again. Another big benefit that we saw was to our PR process. It became much smoother and much simpler because it was an ongoing process. The driver was validating the thoughts of the navigator real time. The navigator was validating the code of the driver, again, real time. When it came to pull requests, which we managed to keep small because we kept each other on track, it was a case of double checking our commit to make sure nothing untoward did creep in. And if you skip this step, you lose this whole benefit, so don't. And then we made the PR. The navigator would run back to their machine and approve it. And then we would go on to our next task. So much better than our old flow, where we threw our pull requests over the wall. We interrupted people whilst we started something new. They threw it back and interrupted us, and we had to context switch back into what we were doing before we could continue. Now, the only context switch is that changing of task at the end of the flow. The last benefit that I really want to talk about is with our onboarding process. This has changed dramatically. When you start a new job, you get your computer, you get a stack of paper, and you have to read and ask your colleagues and interrupt and struggle to find your way around the new system. I've done this various times in my career. Alternatively, you can stick that person with somebody who's already in the team. You can get the newbie gets the insights and experience in the code base and the system that their partner has. And the partner gets a clear insight that only somebody with no preconceived ideas about a project can give. and they are productive from day one. At my job, we've just scaled up dramatically. We increased our teams threefold. In our new project, we went from 1 team to 3 teams in 1 day. Within 2 days, everybody was up and running, and this includes people working on the other side of the world remotely with us in a team. My last 2 thoughts on this. One of them, I always get asked, why do I advocate pair programming? Why do I like it so much? And I like to paraphrase G. Paul Hill here, at G. Paul Hill on Twitter. Can really recommend his tweets. He says about test-driven development, because we are in this for the money. Pairing, when it's practiced right, when it's done right, gets value into the hands of our users quicker. It gets value into the hands of our users that's been better thought out, both in what it should do and in how it does it. I love pairing with one or with multiple people, and I love it because of all the benefits that I've seen it bring to the teams I've worked with, as an individual, as a team, and as a company. Make no mistake, it is really hard. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it already. But I invite you to give it a go. Find your way through the sleepy stages, find out how you can make it work for you, and see what benefits it can bring to you, your team, and your company. I'm Stacy Cashmore. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Stacy, thank you so much. That was great. We're going to just transition into some Q&A. So I'll kick it off. So obviously, the times are a little bit different now. Post-COVID, we would be in person together. However, we're having a remote conference. So in terms of pairing, is there different tactics or different angles that you would either suggest or recommend for remote pairing?
I think the fun one here is at the beginning of the year, I would have said if you've not paired with somebody before you go remote, you're going to find it really difficult. Then at my current company, we all went remote overnight. And actually the teams, although they weren't really that much into it before, they wanted to go into pair programming to make sure that they kept connections between each other. What we noticed is that it is really easy to get exhausted, and it's really easy to slip into sleepy pairing. If you're busy at the keyboard, you've got to make sure that you keep the other person on board. And if you're the navigator, you've got to work twice as hard as working with the driver. The biggest issue that we had halfway through, when I say, when you get that fantastic idea, you just give the keyboard away. That's so much harder to do when the other person is 50 kilometers away in a different city. For that one, the best thing that we found is live share, because we code in .NET. But we also found with enormous projects that we had in our old code base, that could kind of die on us a little bit too. So it meant that we didn't switch as often as we should have done, and we needed to take more breaks to make sure that we kept our energy up.
Yeah, so speaking about that, is there a particular optimal length between switching, or I've heard of Pomodoro type of methods? Yeah, so is there a particular optimal timing, or do you kind of just get a feel for it?
Yeah, I think the second one, it's that perennial phrase. It depends. I know people that really want to work for longer blocks, and I know people that get stuck much earlier. They have a lot more difficulty, especially when you're just getting into pairing. We had one of the new people that joined our teams when I was talking about the expansion of the teams. When the team said, okay, we want to do pair programming, he was like, no, I code with headphones on and music. That's what I do. And for him, it was really, we had to learn a lot more often to just say, okay, my energy's gone. I need to go and do something different for half an hour. And he would either research something, or he would join another team, or he'd just pick up something that could be done on its own. And yeah, we live with the context switching them, because you've got to do what works for the whole team. It's
Great.
we do have other teams that they spend the whole day doing this. They do it as more of a mob than a pair. So they have 3, 4 people. 5, I think they said, was the maximum they could keep occupied. And they handle this situation slightly differently. They work together on a problem. And at the point where something needs researching, they will have 2 people that just say, okay, we're going to do a breakout session. We're going to do something different. You carry on. And then they bring the solution back to the main session and continue. And they switch with each other as they go.
Okay, great. We have a question from the chat as well. Thank you, Judson. In what situations would you say that pair programming would not be the best practice to follow? So maybe are there some outlier scenarios in which you'd say, well, for that one, maybe let's not do pair programming?
I would say if you don't have psychological safety, it's not so much a situation with code, it's more the situation between the people. You have got to be prepared to make mistakes in front of the person you're pairing with, and you've got to be prepared to say to the other person, I don't know, and work together to get it solved. If you don't have that level of psychological safety, then all you're going to do is really bring the energy between the people down, and you're just going to make people feel really uncomfortable and kill morale. As far as coding situation goes, we thought, in my previous team at my last company, we actually thought that if you're doing something really simple like a text change in a HTML page or something like that, that would be the point to say, it's not worth it. This is too simple. But then we noticed the context switching, and even a 5-minute change, which doesn't need a pair for the change itself, the fact that you then have the whole second person on hand to immediately give that approval of the pull request so that you can both continue on to the next task, more than made up for the fact that there were 2 people changing text in a HTML page.
Okay. I've got a question. Maybe this would be sourced from, how do I convince my manager that this is worthwhile to pursue? So is it really efficient to pair, 2 developers working on the same story? Should we do it? I know you spoke a lot about this, but what would you what's the sell there so you could get it started and try it out?
The sell there that I would give to try it out is the context switching. The context switching is what can totally kill you. I believe if you take somebody out of their frame of mind, it's something like 20 minutes to get back in if you're in the middle of a complex problem. And if you're not having to do that a few times a day, you quickly save a lot of time. The other one that I've used in the past is when people say it's not efficient because you can't have 2 people behind one computer doing the same amount of work as 2 people behind 2 computers. And to that, I answer that as a software developer, if all I am doing is writing code, I am costing you too much money because my job as a developer is to solve your problem. And if I'm just spending my time typing, I'm not solving your problems. I'm putting somebody else's solution into the computer, and you're missing most of what I can bring in value to the situation. It can be a really hard sell, and it truly depends on the type of company you're in. If you have the ability to just sneakily do it, if there's somebody that wants to try pair programming with you, sneakily do it. And when you start to see the results, then you can spread it further. It wasn't that we needed to do the hard sell in my old company, but we didn't ask for permission to do it. We just started doing it and then kind of shouted, hey, look how fantastic this is working for us.
Yeah, I love the grassroots movement type method. You can prove it by doing it. I agree. Okay, yeah. Don had a question from the chat as well. Can I teach someone a new tool or a language via pairing where the driver can't always be fully acting on their own?
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of half of what happens when you're onboarding somebody. Because it's hopefully they know your tool and your language, but they don't know your system, they don't know your code layout and your architecture, so you're having to take them through that. We've also had in our current remote OMG, how are we going to do this situation? Our product owner and our testers coding, because we wanted to take everybody in and make sure that everybody was thinking through things together. And the product owner actually said, look, I want to try this. I want to be more involved. I want to do this. So they actually helped out and started to do things. And one of our product owners is actually, we're just changing our data model. And our product owner is actually double checking our data model now when we're changing it and making comments on our code when she sees something that isn't quite what she was expecting. So it definitely slows you down. Make no mistake. That is not as efficient as two people 100% up to speed with the tools and the language and the code base. But it can certainly be done. And we found it an efficient way to do it as well, because it's not go off, do something, and then I'll tell you what's wrong. It's learning real time, seeing what somebody's doing and getting real time feedback on what you're doing.
Yeah. In my own experience as well, trying out pair programming, I feel like DevOps is a constant conversation. How do we reduce silos and break them down? And on the internal team level, it just does wonders there. You really start removing those individual silos of knowledge. So thank you so much. Yes. Do you have any parting thoughts here before we end the QA?
I think the one parting thought is the one that you've just said. The whole breaking down of silos, you can totally do that with this. Rather than throwing things at your testers, get your testers involved at the point when you're writing it. You will see an immediate improvement in the way that you're working.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. That wraps up the Q&A portion.